Do you think Korea is only Samsung, K-pop, and instant ramen? Then how do you like a wooden archive from the 13th century that has not rotted even once in 800 years? And when modern air conditioners were placed nearby, the tablets began to grow mold and had to be returned to the medieval building. Or one man who at night, without a single gram of cement, erected 80 conical towers up to 15 meters high, and they survived typhoons that tore down permanent structures nearby. While the water in the bowls at their base freezes vertically, icicles grow upward against the force of gravity. And for the finale, 35,000 stone monuments, 40% of all the planet's megaliths on one peninsula, and on some of them, precise constellations are carved, adjusted for how the sky looked 3,000 years ago. Korea has existed in one image for too long. Technologies, war, K-drama. This image has closed off the peninsula so tightly that everything else has ceased to be visible behind it. And there is plenty to see there. A storage facility that works better than modern technology for 8 centuries in a row. A calendar tower standing on a swamp without a crack for 1,400 years. Stone discs reproducing the brightness of stars with a precision that science has recorded and has been unable to explain. Korea does not just keep secrets. It built them intentionally, in stone, wood, proportions, and numbers, almost without explanation. Every place we will see today has been studied, documented, and still not fully understood. 5 places, 5 objects for which there is no normal explanation, and the most impossible is still ahead. Let's start with what literally lies beneath your feet if you find yourself on Ganghwa Island. In the middle of a green field stands a construction that at first glance looks simple. 3 vertical stones and 1 horizontal slab on top, much like a children's building set. Except this slab weighs about 70 tons. That is approximately as much as 7 fully loaded railway cars weigh. And it is laid exactly horizontally, without a crane, without iron tools, without the wheel. This is the Bugun-ri Dolmen, one of the largest on the planet. It was included in the UNESCO World Heritage List back in the year 2000, along with several hundred other dolmens in the neighboring regions of Gochang and Hwasun. But it has a detail that is spoken of rarely and reluctantly. The 3 vertical posts that hold this slab are made of 3 different types of stone. Each is from a separate quarry located in different parts of the island. The builders did not just lift a 70-ton monolith. They specifically went to 3 different places, extracted 3 different types of rock, and used them in one construction. This was not an accident or a lack of material. Suitable stone is available very nearby. This means it was a decision, a conscious one. But why? Official science calls dolmens burial structures, graves of the nobility, a place of burial along with grave goods. This version exists, and it is partially confirmed by findings, but it explains the what, not the how or why exactly like this. No historian has explained the logistics of lifting a 70-ton slab by a people without metal tools and without wheeled transport. Theories exist: logs, sand, inclined embankments, but these are theories. There are no calculations that would show exactly how this worked in this specific terrain with this specific weight. The dolmen has stood here for more than 3,000 years already. It survived wars, conquests, the Japanese occupation, when Korean cultural heritage was intentionally rewritten and destroyed. And it stands, level, without a tilt, as if it were laid yesterday. And now add the following detail to this. On the stone slabs of several dolmens in Gochang, scientists discovered carved depressions. At first glance, just pits, chips from time. But when researchers overlaid their arrangement on a map of the night sky of the Bronze Age, adjusted for the precession of the Earth's axis, the coincidence turned out to be exact. These are not random scratches, these are constellations. Ursa Major, the Southern Dipper. The builders did not just copy the sky, they knew what it looked like specifically in their era, several thousand years ago. This requires an understanding of the movement of celestial bodies through time. This requires astronomy. However, the mystery of the dolmens is not exhausted by the weight of the slabs and star maps. There is one more detail that scientists record but are in no hurry to explain. The dolmens on the peninsula are not arranged chaotically. When viewed from the air, from the board of a plane or on a satellite map, it is clearly visible that many of them form distinct linear chains stretched along ridges and river valleys. This is not a random coincidence of the terrain. This is a system. Moreover, a system that can be traced for hundreds of kilometers. What it is needed for, and how the decision on the placement of each specific object was made, official science prefers not to discuss in detail. Too inconvenient a question for the version about just graves. Ask yourself, why would a Bronze Age people who lived by hunting and farming apply precise astronomical maps to headstones and align these slabs in lines visible only from the air? There is no answer. But there is the following fact. Not one of the 35,000 dolmens has been found destroyed from the inside. All those opened were opened from the outside. By whom is unknown. If the dolmens are a message recorded in stone, then 100 kilometers to the south, someone built a device that looks in the same direction. In the city of Gyeongju, the ancient capital of the Silla Kingdom, stands a tower erected in the 7th century AD. It is called Cheomseongdae, translated roughly as the Tower Observing the Stars. It is the oldest surviving astronomical observatory not only in Korea, but in all of East Asia. And it is arranged so that every element of its construction is a number. Count the stones in the walls of the tower. There are 365, according to the number of days in the year. The layers of masonry are 27, and this is not accidental. The tower was erected under the 27th ruler of the Silla state, Queen Seondeok. The square base symbolizes the earth, the cylindrical body, the sky, and the single window is located exactly at the middle of the height and is oriented strictly to the south for observing the culmination of the sun. 12 layers below the window and 12 above, the 12 months of the year, divided by the observation point. At the base of the tower are another 12 stones, one for each sign of the lunar zodiac. Every centimeter of this structure carries a numerical value. The tower stands at a height of about 9 meters. It is not a huge structure, but its mass exceeds 250 tons. And here's what puzzles engineers to this day. It was erected not on rock and not on solid ground. The construction site is a former pond. Boggy, soft, unstable soil that in any other situation builders would have bypassed. But the builders of Cheomseongdae did not bypass it. They filled the bottom with layers of a mixture of crushed stone, charcoal, and river silt in specific proportions. The result was a composite cushioning foundation. For 1,400 years, the tower has not given a single crack or the slightest tilt. It has survived hundreds of earthquakes, some of which destroyed much more massive buildings very nearby. Add to this one more fact that almost never appears in popular sources. Inside the tower, there is not a single floor, not a single staircase. You can get inside only through that very single window, which is located about 4 meters from the ground. This means that for observation, it was necessary to climb up from the outside, possibly by a lean-to ladder. Researchers put forward a version that the tower was used not only as an observation point, but also as a kind of solar compass. Through the window on certain days of the year, light fell on specific points of the internal space, recording the dates of solstices and equinoxes. This is not proven, but it is not refuted. And here's the question that follows from this. If the tower was needed only to look at the stars, why is it so complexly arranged? Why does every stone carry a numerical value? For whom was this cipher intended? Queen Seondeok ascended the throne in the year 632 AD. Korea back then was torn between 3 warring kingdoms. Neighbors were pressing from the north. The country needed an army, fortifications, strategic resources. The first thing the queen ordered to be built was not a fortress wall, not a palace, an observatory. Why did observing the stars become a priority for the ruler of a warring state? What was she looking for in the sky? And did she find what she was looking for? Stone knows how to store information, but it turns out wood does too. On Mount Gyeosan in the southern part of Korea stands a storage facility that beat modern science at its own game. Not for gold and not for weapons, for texts. In the year 1237, when Mongolian troops were burning Korean cities and destroying everything considered the country's cultural heritage, monks manually carved 81,384 wooden tablets with Buddhist texts. Each is double-sided. The work took 16 years. This is the Tripitaka Koreana, the world's most complete collection of the Buddhist canon on wooden media. 800 years have passed. The tablets have not deformed. They have not become covered in mold. There are no traces of wood-boring beetles on them, no traces of rot, no cracks from temperature changes. The wood underwent special treatment. It was kept in seawater for 3 years, then dried in the shade, then covered with lacquer from a special resin. But the preservation of the tablets is explained not only by the material, it is explained by the building in which they are stored. The Jungyong Punjeon storage facility was built without a single nail. The wooden structures are connected only by grooves. The floors are filled with successive layers: charcoal, lime, salt, clay, sand, in strictly defined proportions. This mixture regulates humidity, absorbing its excess in wet weather and giving it back in dry weather. The windows are arranged asymmetrically. On the southern side, they are smaller. On the northern side, larger. On the first floor, wider. On the second, narrower. This asymmetry creates constant air circulation, which maintains a stable temperature and humidity inside, regardless of the weather outside. The system works around the clock, without maintenance, without energy sources. In the 20th century, the government of Korea built a modern storage facility nearby, with air conditioners, climate control systems, and humidity sensors. Some of the tablets were moved there. After a few years, mold began to appear on some of them. The tablets were returned to the old building. The mold disappeared. Scientists from several universities spent years studying the 13th century ventilation system. To this day, they have not been able to reproduce it with the same precision. There is one more fact about the Tripitaka that is no less striking than the architecture. When scientists in the 20th century began to systematically investigate the tablets, they discovered that over 16 years of work, during the production of more than 80,000 double-sided tablets, there are practically no errors in the texts. No missing characters, no repetitions, no incorrect substitutions. This means either an incredible system of multi-level verification, or that the masters knew the texts by heart so well that they did not make mistakes while carving. Under conditions of war, famine, and the constant threat of attack, this is not just transcription. This is an operation carried out under war conditions with a precision that we have not explained to this day. And the question is not how they did it, but why they were so certain that this needed to be preserved. 13th century monks, building this structure during a war, under conditions of constant raids and destruction, designed a climate control system that we cannot replicate 8 centuries later. They knew something about the physics of air that we do not yet know. What exactly, and where did they get it from? There is a place in Korea that is almost never mentioned in tourist guidebooks. Jeollanam-do Province, a small valley near the city of Hwasun. Scattered on the slopes of low hills, here are hundreds of stone figures and pagodas. This is the Unjus Temple, translated as the place where the clouds stay. The exact date of its founding is unknown. The name of the architect is unknown. Officially, it is believed that the temple was founded in the 10th or 11th century during the Goryeo dynasty, but there is almost no direct evidence of this. The first written mention is dated only to 1530. Among all the objects on the temple grounds, there is a group that falls out of any usual logic. In the grass, along the path, lie several stone discs. They are flat, of different sizes, from 2 to 4 meters in diameter. At first glance, it seems that they were simply scattered here without a system. But researchers from Cheonam National University, who studied the temple in the 80s, discovered a pattern. The discs are arranged in the shape of the constellation Ursa Major. Moreover, the thickness of each disc differs, and this difference exactly reproduces the difference in the brightness of the stars of this asterism. A brighter star, a thicker disc. Scientists have called these the world's oldest astronomical data about Ursa Major recorded in a physical object. This is already the second time we have encountered precise star maps built into Korean stone constructions. First, the Dolmens in Gochang, constellations carved on headstones 3,000 years ago. Now, the stone discs in the Hwasun Valley, in which the brightness of stars is encoded. This is not a coincidence. This is a tradition. Someone on this peninsula throughout the millennia intentionally encoded astronomical information in stone. The question is why? For whom? And whether most of the keys to this code have been lost irretrievably. What is noteworthy, the discs do not just lie in a field. They are oriented so that on the day of the summer solstice, the shadow from the central disc falls exactly onto the next one, like an arrow on a map. This was recorded by researchers in 1987. They repeated the measurement in 2003. The result matched to the centimeter. Someone calculated this system hundreds of years in advance and simply placed the stones in the grass, leaving neither a signature nor an explanation. On the top of the hill behind the main hall lie two 12-meter Buddha figures. They are not standing, they lie on their backs, as if sleeping. Legend says, heavenly stonemasons descended at night to erect 1,000 statues and 1,000 pagodas here. They almost made it, but dawn came ahead of time, the rooster crowed, and the masters were called back. The last two figures remained lying unfinished. According to legend, when they wake up, a new era will begin. This, of course, is a myth. But a fact that is not a myth. 10 stone quarries from which material was extracted are still located around the temple. On the stones near them are characteristic grooves from moving heavy blocks. The construction really was interrupted. Something stopped it, and no one returned to finish. Everything that came before this is ancient, but the next place will break you the most. Imagine mountain mist, two rocky peaks that locals call horse ears, and between them, more than 80 conical towers reaching for the sky. Dark, silent, stacked without a single gram of mortar. They stand in Jeollabuk-do province in the Maesan Mountains, and one man built them. His name was Lee Gap-yong. He was born in 1860 and died in 1957. Almost 100 years of life, and most of them, several decades in a row, he spent here, in the mountains, at night, in complete solitude, stacking stones one on top of the other. The towers are conical in shape, narrowing towards the top. Some reach 15 meters in height. There are more than 80 of them. Not one, not a single one of them is fastened with mortar. No cement, no clay, no lime, only stone on stone, stone between stones, stone inside stones, in a combination that Lee Gap-yong called prayerful stacking. He came here at night. He said the mountain spirits do not allow working during the day. Local residents laughed at first. Then they stopped, when they realized that the towers were standing. There is one more detail that is rarely spoken of. Lee Gap-yong did not just stack stones randomly. He built each tower from scratch, without redoing it. Not a single restacked section, not a single block that had to be removed and put back in place. This means that before laying the next stone, he calculated the construction in his head completely. Architects who studied the towers in the 90s confirmed. The center of gravity of each structure is shifted exactly enough to compensate for the slope of the mountain. This is not a prayer. This is engineering. Without a single tool. They have stood for more than 100 years. During this time, Jeollabuk-do province has survived several destructive typhoons with winds over 180 kilometers per hour. Neighboring villages lost roofs, trees were uprooted, permanent buildings were destroyed. The Thapsa towers did not move a single centimeter. Engineers who studied the construction recorded, each stone is positioned in such a way that it compensates for the pressure of its neighbors, creating a system of dynamic equilibrium. The entire construction does not resist the wind load. It absorbs and redistributes it, like modern earthquake-resistant buildings. This is not an accident. This is an exact calculation. But Yong left behind not a single drawing, not a single record, not a single diagram. And the last thing, every winter, water freezes in the stone bowls next to the towers. Not the way it freezes everywhere, horizontally, downward, turning into flat ice. Here, the water freezes vertically. Icicles grow upward, against the force of gravity. This phenomenon is documented, photographed by hundreds of people. It repeats every winter without exception. A physical explanation exists. Special conditions of pressure and evaporation around the towers create an upward flow of cold air that freezes the water from the bottom up. Perhaps. But then the question sounds different. How did the 19th century man, without education, without instruments, without engineering experience, at night, in solitude, build a construction that changes the movement of air around itself so much that it violates the usual physics of water? 35,000 dolmens with star maps on the slabs, a calendar tower on a swamp that has not cracked in 1,400 years, a wooden storage facility that handles preservation better than modern equipment, stone discs reproducing the brightness of stars, towers without cement that change the physics of the air. All of this is not myths and not theories. These are objects that exist, are documented, studied, and are still not fully explained. Korea is a peninsula that for millennia built things the meaning of which we understand only partially. And, perhaps most important here, is not the question how, but the question why. What forced different generations to encode stars in stone? Write in the comments, which of the 5 objects surprised you the most? Give a like if it was interesting, it's the best way to say that the topic hit home. And subscribe so as not to miss the next journey. There are even more places ahead that they won't tell you about in textbooks.